I never thought that at 64 I would witness a crime so raw, not on the news, but right before my eyes. That morning, the surface of Otter Creek was still as glass. The first light of day shimmered on specks of mud, calm and quiet in a way that almost felt holy. But in the middle of that peaceful current, a plastic bag was drifting. At first I thought it was trash. In this small town that wasn't unusual, but as the bag turned, a tiny foot slipped out, thin black, trembling. Then came a faint, raspy breath so weak I thought it was just the wind. I froze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Kneeling on the muddy bank, my hand shook as I pulled the bag closer. When the plastic tore open, what I saw made my blood turn cold. Inside was a puppy, a Doberman, barely a month old. Its black and tan fur was matted flat, dull like ash. Its belly was swollen like a balloon, legs curled, tight eyes sealed shut, and from its mouth water and white foam trickled out. On the bag the ink had blurred in the water, but I could still read the words, "Do not keep." Sick. Someone had tied it shut and thrown it into the river. Not an accident. Not a mistake. A deliberate killing. Something inside my chest cracked open. I reached into the water and lifted that tiny body. It was limp, ice cold. No response. A faint, metallic smell clung to it, the scent of river water, milk, and death. I pressed my hand against its chest. 1, 2 seconds. Then I felt it, a heartbeat. Weak, fragile, but there. "No, you can't," I whispered aloud, though no one was there to hear. I pulled the puppy against me, holding it tight as if letting go would make it vanish into the air. "Come on, baby. Stay with me. You have to live, do you hear?" My body trembled. For a moment I was back on that night when I held my husband as he slipped away, the same coldness, the same silence, the same unbearable fragility. I looked around, no one. Only the sound of the river lapping the shore and the wind threading through the willows. The world seemed to stop, just two living souls clinging to each other between life and death. My name is Margaret Evans. I live alone on the outskirts of Ely, Minnesota. My small wooden house sits at the end of Maple Road, where every morning I walk along this same riverbank. The doctor says walking helps maintain my health, but I know they're just giving me a reason to get out of bed. I have stage 2 lung cancer, and my life, like this little dog's, is hanging by a thread. My husband died in an accident 8 years ago. My son Ethan works as an engineer in Chicago. He rarely visits. Once a month he calls. The same short exchange every time: "Mom, you doing okay? I'm fine. I'm busy. But take care of yourself." "Okay." Then silence. The house has become a hollow space, just me and Oliver, the stray cat I rescued one winter years ago. He's old now, but still sits beside me each night, listening to the sound of my breathing machine and the wind moaning through the window frames. This morning, Oliver wouldn't go out on the porch. He sat on the steps staring toward the river, back arched fur standing on end. I even joked, "What's down there, Oliver?" He didn't move. Now, holding this drenched creature in my arms, I understand. He knew. Sometimes animals sense what humans pretend not to see. They can feel cruelty, abandonment, and the quiet fading of fear. I rose to my feet, clutching the puppy close. Water dripped down the front of my coat. "Stay with me, baby. Stay with me." I wasn't thinking anymore. Not about the cancer, not about my age. Just one thing: it needed me now. So I started running. Down the gravel road, lungs burning, every step heavy as if I were dragging the whole world behind me. I didn't have a car. No one knew I was here. But I knew if I stopped, the small life in my arms would never open its eyes again. If I don't do something right now, I told myself, the only thing left in that river will be my conscience. I don't know how long I'd been running. The path along the river twisted and slicked with mud, but I kept holding that tiny creature in my arms, shaking ice-cold, motionless. The wind whipped against my face, carrying the smell of river water and wet soil. I could hear my own breath breaking in uneven bursts while its heartbeat fluttered against my palm, thin as smoke. I tried to keep it warm with my body, pulling my coat closed, whispering between gasps, "Don't give up. You hear me. Don't give up the way I once did." Flashes of the past tore through my mind. My husband, lying in the hospital tubes everywhere and me sitting helplessly beside him. I couldn't save him. But this time I wouldn't let that happen again. The riverbank rose steeply, the road leading toward the neighborhood still soaked from last night's rain. In the distance, I caught the faint glow of the gas station at the edge of town. I shouted, waved my arms, but no one heard over the hum of passing engines. Then a man in an old pickup truck spotted me, drenched, hair tangled, clutching something tight against my chest. He slammed on the brakes, the door creaking open. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he called. I nearly screamed, "Please take me to the vet. This animal, he's dying." He didn't hesitate. "Get in quick." I climbed onto the seat, holding the puppy close, water dripping onto the floor mats. The driver didn't ask another question. His voice was rough but steady as he checked the rearview mirror. "We're heading to Grace Mitchell's place. She's the best vet around here." I nodded, too breathless to thank him. The truck rattled over potholes, each jolt making the puppy's weak breath falter, then fade a little more. I pressed my hand to its chest, counting softly under my breath. Every rise of its ribs felt like a small miracle. "Come on, River," I said, calling it by a name that hadn't existed until that moment. "Don't sleep, you have to hear me." But there was no response, just the faint hiss of labored breathing, and now and then a thin thread of white foam. When we reached Ely, the dashboard clock read 6:45 a.m. Cold morning light washed the fronts of the bakery and the small post office in a pale gold haze. Grace's veterinary clinic sat at the corner of Pine and 3rd Street, a brick building with frosted windows. I jumped out before the truck had fully stopped shouting, "Somebody, please help us." No answer, the door was locked, the sign unlit. I pounded on the glass, the sound echoing down the still sleeping street. "Please, he's dying, nothing." Only the wind and the sound of my own ragged breath. I looked down. The puppy lay limp, head tilted, a trickle of water and foam slipping from his mouth. I knelt on the cold porch, laid him down, and pressed both hands to his tiny chest, doing what I'd seen in those first aid videos. "Come on, sweetheart, come on." I pushed lightly, counting. 1, 2, 3, then bent down and breathed air into his mouth. No response. I did it again, and again. Water spilled from his lungs, mixing with mud and white foam coating my hands. I wasn't disgusted, just terrified. I kept going until my throat burned and my fingers went numb. Then, a sound, a faint broken gasp, soft as torn paper. I almost cried. That's it, baby. Mama's here. Just then, footsteps crunched on the gravel behind me. I turned, a young woman with her hair tied back, white coat, half-buttoned bag slung over one shoulder was running toward me. "What are you doing out here?" she panted. I was half sobbing as I spoke. "Please save him. Someone threw him in the river." She looked at me, then down at the puppy. For a moment her eyes changed fear, giving way to focus. "Bring him inside, now." She unlocked the door, motioning fast. "Put him on the table. Call the nurse if you have a phone." I didn't. I just stood there, gripping the blanket wrapped around his body, trembling uncontrollably. She attached a breathing tube, fetched warm towels, her voice calm but firm. "There's a chance, but we have to move fast." Then came the sound, beep, beep, steady, mechanical, cold. The heart monitor was reading. Weak, but still there. And in that moment, under the bright light and the mist rising from the heat machine, I understood. Some souls, even when abandoned by humans, still fight for every last breath. And I, a dying woman, was praying for another life to keep living in my place. Inside the clinic, the white light hit my eyes so sharply it almost hurt. The room was small, clean, and bright, but all I could hear was the uneven beep, beep of the heart monitor. Grace Mitchell, the young veterinarian, was working nonstop. Sweat dotted her forehead, yet her eyes stayed calm, focused as if she were fighting something invisible. I stood beside the table, gripping the cold metal edge, my heart pounding out of rhythm. In front of me, the puppy lay curled under a damp blanket. That tiny body was no bigger than my 2 hands, but the whole room seemed to revolve around each fragile breath it took. "The heart's very weak," Grace said quickly, inserting the oxygen tube while preparing a syringe. "I need to drain the fluid from his lungs now." She fitted a thin tube to a suction pump and gently slid it into the puppy's mouth. The sound that followed wet, gurgling awful made me feel like my own lungs were being emptied of air. A stream of cloudy water mixed with white foam spilled out. I held my breath, eyes locked on her every movement. "Is there still a heartbeat?" I asked. Grace nodded. "Faint, but yes." I exhaled, tears spilling down my cheeks. In that moment, I didn't feel like a sick woman anymore, just a human being praying for a miracle. Grace wrapped the puppy in a warm towel and gestured to me. "Hold him. Put your hand on his chest. Help me keep his body heat stable. I need to prep the adrenaline." I obeyed. That tiny rib cage rose and fell beneath my palm, fragile as paper, yet still alive. I leaned close, whispering near his ear. "Listen to me, River. You made it across that river to get here. Don't give up now." Grace returned syringe in hand. She slipped the needle into the small vein of his leg, quick, steady, precise. The room went still. Only the monitor filled the silence. Beep. Beep, beep. Then, suddenly, a sharper tone. Beep, 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 beep. His heartbeat was climbing. The tiny body twitched. A faint tremor like the first reflex of life. I gasped, then broke down in tears. Grace glanced at the clock, her lips curving into a tired smile. "All right," she said softly. "This little one's not giving up that easily." My legs gave way, and I sank into the chair weak with relief. I tried to say thank you, but the words got stuck somewhere deep in my throat. Grace rolled over a heater, set it near the table, and adjusted the temperature to low. "He's in severe hypothermia," she said gently. "Keep him warm, okay. I'll mix an electrolyte solution." I nodded. My hands never left his body as warmth began to return, slow but steady. His breathing grew lighter, more even. His eyelids fluttered faintly. I stroked his head with the tip of my finger, the skin thin and damp fur sparse and patchy. He looked so frail he could have been carried off by the slightest breath of air. "Do you think someone threw him away on purpose?" I asked quietly. Grace looked up, anger flashing across her eyes. "Not think no. It happens more often than you'd believe, especially with Dobermans or pit bulls. People see them as sick or useless and toss them like trash." She paused, meeting my eyes. "But not everyone stops to save them, you know that, right?" I said nothing. Just bent lower, tightening my hold on the tiny, trembling life in my hands. Then it happened. He opened his mouth, drawing a deep, shaky breath. A soft whimper followed, thin as thread. Grace smiled. "Welcome back, little one." I looked down at him, eyes half closed, chest, gently rising droplets of water still glistening on his muzzle. I had never seen anything so fragile, or so beautiful. A life returned from the edge of death. "You got here just in time," Grace said softly. 5 more minutes, and his heart would have stopped. "I don't know who threw him away, but if you hadn't been there—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I knew the rest. I placed my hand on his head, feeling the warmth spread beneath my skin. A tear slipped down my cheek and landed on his nose, merging with the last drop of river water still clinging there. "You're going to live," I whispered. "I promise." Grace nodded gently. "We'll keep him here for a few hours to monitor. After that, if you're willing, I'll show you how to care for him temporarily. He'll need somewhere quiet, clean, and warm." I nodded instantly. "I can manage, I will." Outside, the sun had begun to rise. Light spilled through the frosted glass, spreading across the white wall like a soft golden smile of a new morning. And for the first time in years, I felt something stir back to life, not just in my hands, but inside me. I don't remember how long I sat in that clinic. Maybe a few hours. Maybe a lifetime. All I recall is the soft golden light slipping through the window frame, spilling across the tiny face sleeping inside the warm towel. Grace came over, her voice gentler now. "His heart's stable. I've given him a bit of nutritional fluid, but he'll need monitoring for a few days. You can take him home for temporary care if you'd like." I looked at the puppy, his fur slowly drying his breathing, even his belly rising and falling in slow rhythm. "Yes," I said, almost instantly. "I'll take care of him." Grace smiled faintly, as if she'd expected that answer. She handed me a short printed note, the words neat and precise. "Keep warm. Feed warm milk every 3 hours. Avoid loud noise. Never leave him alone." "Alone," I repeated, smiling softly. "That part I think I understand." Grace met my eyes silent for a moment, then said quietly, "You have a kind heart, Margaret." I drove home in the pickup the kind man had lent me. He insisted on helping carry the puppy right to my doorstep. I thanked him, but I couldn't bring myself to tell the whole story. I only said, "You saved 2 lives this morning, not just one." When I stepped inside, Oliver, the old cat, was already waiting on the porch. He looked at the warm bundle in my arms, then up at me. His tail swept slowly across the floor. He didn't make a sound. I laid out a clean blanket in the corner of the living room, placed the little dog down, and turned on the old space heater. Following Grace's instructions, I warmed some milk, poured it into a small bottle, and gently touched it to his mouth. At first, no reaction, but when a single drop touched his tongue, he twitched faintly. I held still, waiting, 1 minute, 2, and then he began to suckle, slow but steady. Tears welled in my eyes, not out of pity, but because I knew he was choosing to stay. That afternoon, the fading sunlight streamed through the curtains. River slept soundly in his towel, breathing soft and shallow, twitching now and then as if dreaming. Oliver lay a few feet away, still watching, alert but unthreatened. I sat in the chair, hands resting on my knees, watching the quiet scene like it was a small miracle I'd waited my whole life to witness. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt peace. Maybe before the illness. Before the house grew so silent that the ticking clock sounded like it was striking my own heart. But tonight, that sound was replaced by something else. The gentle breathing of 2 souls asleep side by side, one old one, newly reborn. By the 3rd day, River could stand. His legs trembled, sliding on the wooden floor, but he kept trying, each step small, uncertain, yet determined. His brown eyes were wide and clear as glass. I sat beside him, steadying him. "Good boy," I whispered. "Just like that, sweetheart." He looked up at me, ears drooping slightly, then to my surprise he licked the tip of my finger. That feeling, warm, fragile, made me laugh. A real laugh, the first in months. I decided to call him River, because he had swum against the current to live, and because I had found him in the water where I thought only death existed. That evening, Grace called. Her voice over the phone was soft. "Mrs. Evans, how's River doing?" I smiled. "Better than I ever hoped. He eats, sleeps, and even barked just once, but he did." "Then you've done better than I have," she laughed. "But remember, you need rest too. Don't forget your own health." I paused. You know, Grace, ever since he came, I've been breathing a little deeper every morning. Maybe that's my body's way of saying it still wants to live. She didn't answer right away. Just a quiet sigh. I believe it does. Night fell. River slept curled against my chest. Oliver lay at the foot of the bed, tail tucked close. Outside, rain began to fall softly against the porch roof. Each drop felt like it was washing away an old memory, rinsing the grief that had clung for years. And I realized my illness, my loneliness, my loss, all of it seemed smaller now, as small as the faint heartbeat I had held in my hands that morning by the river. I touched River gently and whispered, "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for reminding me that this life still holds something worth keeping." He didn't answer, just shifted slightly, stretching one tiny paw toward me in his sleep. And under the soft amber glow of the lamp, I finally saw what I'd never dared to admit I hadn't saved him. He was saving me. Saturday morning, the sky over Ely was washed in silver gray. The wind swept hard through the willows, carrying the damp scent of the Otter Creek, the river I'd avoided looking at for 2 weeks now. I still warmed milk for River, same as every day. He waited patiently on the rug by the fireplace, brown eyes, shining tail wagging gently, his head tilted to one side, the way a child waits for its mother. His body was nothing like the frail little form I'd pulled from the water. The black and tan coat gleamed again, skin filled out, breath steady. Only one thing hadn't changed those eyes. Eyes full of gratitude and longing, as if he somehow knew happiness doesn't last forever. I sat beside him, set down the bowl, and whispered, "You've grown so fast, River. I'm not sure I can keep up anymore." He looked up, licked my hand softly, then lowered his head to drink. Oliver lay on the window ledge, half asleep, his tail swaying lazily. The peace in that room was so complete I wished time could stop. Around noon, Grace called. Her voice was calm, but I sensed something different in it. "Mrs. Evans, I spoke with the Pine Ridge Rescue Center. They have a special care unit for abandoned dogs. River's strong enough to move there in a few days." I went quiet for a moment, looking at the little dog curled up on the rug. "How soon?" I asked. "Wednesday." I knew it was the right thing. I knew I couldn't keep him, not with my illness, not with the little time I had left. But knowing and accepting are two different things. After the call, I turned off the light and sat by the window. The sky darkened, and the first drops of rain tapped against the glass. River came over and rested his head on my leg. I stroked his back, listening to the rain on the porch roof, feeling my chest tighten. "You know," I whispered, "when a person loses everything, sometimes it only takes a small creature to make the world mean something again. But one day they have to learn to let go." He didn't understand the words, but I knew he felt the weight of them. His ears drooped. He pressed his head deeper into my lap, trembling slightly. That night, the rain turned into a storm. Thunder rolled across the roof, shaking the whole house. I stayed awake, holding River close, afraid the thunder might frighten him. But he wasn't afraid. He only whimpered softly, then pushed himself tighter against my chest. I felt his heartbeat, strong, steady, far surer than mine. I stared at the ceiling and whispered into the dark, "If I'm not here tomorrow, please, let him be loved once more." The rain kept falling. I heard Oliver jump onto the table and curl into sleep. Outside, the Otter rose high, its waters slapping the shore like the earth itself sighing. By morning, the rain had stopped, though the air was still heavy with damp moss and river scent. The ground outside glistened with tiny paw prints, River's. He was sitting at the edge of the wooden bridge where the river curved away. I walked slowly toward him, calling out, "River, come inside, sweetheart. It's cold." He didn't turn. When I crouched beside him, I saw his eyes fixed on the water. and I understood. That was where I had pulled him out 2 weeks ago. Maybe some part of him still remembered that nightmare. I sat next to him, gently resting my hand on his neck. "It's all right now," I said softly. "It's over. No one's ever throwing you away again." He looked up at me, then suddenly licked my cheek just once. Maybe it was a thank you, maybe a goodbye. I couldn't hold back the tears. That afternoon, Grace came by the house. She brought a few supplies to prepare for the transfer. Looking at River asleep on the couch, she smiled. He looks like a child, finally resting after the storm. I nodded, trying to hide what I felt. Yes, it's just, I'm not sure I'm ready to say goodbye. Grace placed a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "No one ever is, but you did the right thing." After she left, I looked around the house. Everything was the same as before, except for one thing. I had grown used to the sound of small footsteps, to the faint bark each morning, and I knew when he left the silence would return. But this time the silence wouldn't feel empty. It would feel like peace, something both River and I had found after all we'd lost. I stood by the window, watching the light rain drift beyond the porch, and whispered, not sure if to myself or to someone beyond, maybe every meeting is meant to happen, if only to teach us how to love. One last time. Wednesday morning came faster than I expected. The sky was pale blue, no wind, no rain, just a heavy stillness hanging in the air. I prepared River's breakfast, my hands trembling slightly as I opened the milk can. He had no idea what was coming. He still looked up at me with those bright brown eyes, tail swaying gently, as if today were just another ordinary day. Oliver sat quietly on the corner of the table, watching. The old cat seemed to understand better than I did that something would leave and never return. Grace arrived right at 8. She carried a small plastic crate lined with a soft blanket. When she saw River, she knelt down, stroked his head, and spoke in a voice so tender it felt like she was afraid to break the silence. "Hey there, little guy. It's time." I sat beside him, wrapping my arms around his body. The familiar warmth, the rhythm of his breathing, the faint scent of milk in his fur, all of it came rushing back. "Do you remember when we first met?" I whispered. "You were so cold, so tiny you could fit in my palm. And now, look at you." He tilted his head, those brown eyes holding mine for a long moment, then licked my wrist just once. A simple gesture, yet it made my heart ache. I took a deep breath. "Let's go, River." The drive to Pine Ridge took barely half an hour, though I wished it could have lasted longer. I sat in the back seat, River asleep in my lap, his head resting in my hands. Outside, the world drifted by in slow motion. Green fields, wooden barns, weathered signs fading into the morning light. When the car stopped, a soft breeze came through the window, carrying the smell of pine and damp earth. The rescue center stood nestled among tall trees, surrounded by wooden fences and tidy outdoor kennels. A young woman stepped out to greet us, Rachel Myers, the warden of the sanctuary. She smiled, her eyes kind. "You must be Mrs. Evans. We've been expecting River." I nodded, unable to speak. Rachel opened the gate. Inside was a wide grassy yard, where a few dogs lounged lazily under the sun. River hesitated, glancing at me, then at the open space ahead. I bent down, placing my hand on his chest. "Go on, sweetheart. You'll have friends here, a life you deserve." He lingered for a moment, then took slow, careful steps toward Rachel. As she opened the fence wider, he turned back to look at me one last time. Those eyes, warm, grateful, and impossibly sad, burned themselves into my heart. A large dog walked up, sniffed River's muzzle, and gently licked his forehead. River let out a small bark, the first since the day I'd pulled him from the river. I smiled through my tears. Rachel turned to me, her voice soft. "Not everyone would have done what you did, Margaret. Most people would have walked away, but you stopped." I swallowed hard, my voice breaking. "I just did what any human being should do. I turned before I could lose my strength. The gate closed behind me and the wind moved through the pines, whispering softly. And in that whisper, I heard it a faint bark, distant yet clear, the voice of a small soul who had finally found his world again. The next morning, I walked again along the banks of Otter Creek. The path was the same damp, moss-covered, carrying the faint scent of wet earth in the breeze. But today it no longer felt heavy. The water was still and gleaming, catching the morning sun like 1,000 drifting stars. I stopped at the same spot where I had pulled River back from death. A light wind brushed through my hair, cold but gentle. I closed my eyes and listened to the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. And in that quiet sound, I thought I could hear a distant bark, soft, familiar. "Mom, I'm still here. I'm running, playing, breathing, just like you wanted me to." I opened my eyes. There was no one there, only the whisper of the river against the shore. But I knew somewhere in this wide world River was truly happy. When I got home, Oliver came trotting out onto the porch. The old cat rubbed his head against my leg and purred softly. Inside the little house, the early light stretched long across the wooden floor, touching the photo of my husband on the wall. I looked up and smiled. "Henry," I whispered, "I think I finally did something right." I brewed coffee and sat down in the old wooden chair by the window, the one that had always felt empty, but somehow today it was warm. On the table lay a small collar Grace had left for me that morning, engraved with a single word, River. I picked it up, the metal cool against my trembling fingers, and held it tight. Not because I was sad, but because I knew I had been saved. In the days that followed, I still walked every morning. I started talking to neighbors, something I hadn't done in years. Children in the neighborhood stopped by asking about the old lady who saved the puppy. Soon, the whole town knew the story. Grace told me that when River was first released into the open yard at Pine Ridge, he didn't hide, didn't cower. He ran straight to his caretaker tail, wagging eyes bright. He trusted people despite everything they'd done to him. That sentence caught in my throat. Because that was the lesson I never expected to learn from a dog trust. That afternoon, I went back to the river. The sunset spread wide and golden, warm as honey. I sat down and placed my hand on the cool surface of the water, feeling the quiet current slip through my fingers. And I said softly to myself, to River, to anyone who might be listening, "If you ever see a life abandoned, please don't turn away." Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can save 2 lives, theirs and your own. I looked up. The sun was setting, leaving a ribbon of gold across the river's surface. A breeze rustled through the willows, and in that moment I felt my husband River and everything I'd lost close, peaceful present. I smiled and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a reason to live again." I once believed I had saved River from death, but now I know it was he who saved me from loneliness, from despair, from those endless hollow days. A small, fragile creature thrown away, forsaken, labeled unworthy of life, had still chosen to believe in humans. And by doing so, he gave me a second chance. If a puppy once cast into a freezing river can learn to trust again, then maybe we humans can learn to trust, to love, and to forgive again, too. They say, not everyone can change the world. But I believe, if you save even one small life, the world, at least for that soul, has already changed forever. And what about you? Have you ever saved a dog or simply stopped out of compassion? If you have, tell your story. Let's share it together. Let's spread kindness, empathy, and second chances for every soul ever abandoned, so that no one, human or animal, will ever be left behind or alone again.